Would you care to step outside?
You did it to this.
Superman.
My son will be raised.
You are him. The last world has to compels me to reveal the truth.
I'm Batman.
Warning, DC and RMD contains adult language and discussions. If you're easily offended, do not continue to listen.
Awesome. Oh, sorry. That's your signal. That means we have to go now.
Hello, welcome everyone to DC on RMD, the Superman and Lois edition. We are back in the studio to talk about the 6th episode of season 4, titled When the Lights Come On. I was waiting pretty much through the entire episode to see when this title would take effect. What does this title mean? Most titles mean something. Well, we had our Superman 2 moment, David.
Red light, green light, Mike. Red light, green light.
I got a little giddy. Although I was happy to see that his power, Superman's power, was not permanently removed. That just would have felt a little weird after already going through the death of Superman to now go through the weakening of Superman.
But I like the red light.
Yeah, I like the red light.
It was a wink nod, you know.
It was
Is that cool. The first thing you guys thought of?
Yeah.
Yes. And especially it was perfect because like it's Lex Luthor pulling it off on Clark, and that's the only person I would see do that.
I want to know, did he like hire the Smallville utility company guys to like under the cloak of darkness to like change the lights, because he had a little clicker that turned the whole downtown red.
I'm telling you, Steve, it's Brainiac. It's Brainiac.
I was saying, you know how you slip in the old days, like the cable guy, an extra like $200 or $300. That's probably what Lex did. He's like, hey, I need you to install some red lights. I have the technology to install it. It's just some bulbs.
It'll make the whole downtown sparkle. It'll be good.
Yeah, I'm doing my charitable work. I'm new to the town, and I just want to feel like I'm doing my part for Smallville.
It's for Christmas.
LEDs, they're super power efficient.
Yeah, so this was another strong episode. I definitely enjoyed it. I'm not having any problems this season. Well, we had problems any season, really, but even more so this particular final season. I was going into the season a little cautious, only because it is the final season, and we have just been given shit after shit from other TV shows of late that I just wasn't expecting this to just continue its quality, because it is also being managed by a different group of people. Same writing crew, but it's no longer necessarily being operated via the day-to-day through Warner Brothers.
But that's the thing, though. I mean, one of the things that I've noticed with all our shows up to this point for Superman and Lois is the fact that every single season, the only really consensus that we could that you could say is a con for us is we've always approached hesitation during a certain season. And
particularly at the beginning.
But like every single time this crew has proven to us to, hey, have faith in us. We're going to lay some foundations in the beginning that will be answered by the end.
That's why I probably should just get over it by now, because they've never disappointed us. But when you watch 7 to 10 shows in between each season of Superman and Lois, and 90% of the shows end up disappointing you, it kind of sticks with you. Even when you're going into something that you know should be good because it has a great track record. But that being said, the season is firing on all cylinders. It's pretty much doing, and not because it's predictable, but yet again, this show is on the same wavelength as us. I don't think I've ever covered a show, Dave and Steve, on this network over the last 12 years where we're just on the same wavelength of the writing room. Because, Dave, did I not say that we're going to get a Superman probably during our last discussion? We're going to get a Superman that is probably going to end the season as a man. Now, he'll still be super, but he's going to age. And I think that's going to be the happy story, I said. The happy story and the great ending is going to be that he's going to be able to live out his life like a human with the very people he loves.
And not probably die long after or not at all seeing his family
Seeing his
pass,
family.
right?
Yeah.
And what the other thing that I was thinking of as I was watching this episode, because I was down with the sickness last week, so I didn't get to come here with you guys.
Yeah, you had kryptonite sickness.
I had kryptonite sickness. I did.
Yeah, Richard Pryor.
Richard Pryor.
didn't have the full ingredients.
It had tobacco in it. It was bad. But the week before when we recorded, I even mentioned that we're probably going to see a proper Lex suit, and I'll be damned if that wasn't dropped.
The war suit,
and it's like, you're right, Mike. We have been right there with them so much of the way over these 4 seasons.
Well, the amazing thing too about like this series is that every single story element they have tackled throughout all their seasons have been story elements that me as a comic book fan never thought would be done properly. No one ever thought that they can do a Doomsday story, because Doomsday has been done to death.
Mm-hmm.
But the show has shown that we can take that story and give our own spin on it and make it more interesting.
Well, not just that, all the different classic things that you would want to see as a fan
of Superman, and then like
remixed and done differently, but also making it all make sense and work is no small feat.
Oh yeah, and then like when you get to that part where you're talking about, Mike, where we're gonna see a human Superman, one of the I guess you could say comic book tropes that a lot of Superman fans feel is Superman can never have like a full happy ending. Because even like, say, Kingdom Come Superman, he ages because he gives up being Superman. That was the whole point of Kingdom Come, was like Superman walked away because he lost faith in humanity and basically decided to just live off on his farm. Hence, he started aging. And every time they do a story that basically has Superman aging, it's always kind of like a sad point. It's always like, well, we need Superman back so he can't age. Here, I mean, last episode, you were asking, can we actually have a happy ending where Clark or Superman ages? And at this point, even with this, after this episode, I'm like going, yeah, you could.
Well, and it made him super relatable too, because the whole joke around him dyeing his hair.
Yeah, dude, that was funny.
You know, and I noticed in the first couple episodes in particular, and we didn't really talk about, I don't think we talked about it. You could see the pepper going on in the beard, you know, and as a Mike, you can relate, I know, right? You start looking in the mirror one day and you're like,
I can relate to Clark hiding the dye in his pocket.
Right. But you start, you hit a certain age and you're like, well, wait a minute, what is this white hair here? And then, 2 weeks later, it's like there's 10 of them, and then suddenly you're dyeing your hair. And yeah, man, it's relatable.
Suddenly you wake up and you look like Santa Claus. Like, what the fuck happened?
Right.
David, you're right 100% about the aging thing and how typically it's a sadder story for Superman.
It's always been a sadder story.
Whereas with this one, it is going to be different. If they continue and they stick with this idea that he is going to be a Superman that ages like at a normal human rate, that isn't sad for one very big reason. When it comes to this version of Superman, this show has built this epic love story. It is a love story.
Yeah.
That's what this version of Superman is in a lot of ways. It's a Superman story, it's a Lois story, but also at its core, it is a love story. It's a romance. What better way to end a show with Superman than allow him to die with the ones he loves?
Yeah.
That is a beautiful, and I'm going to freaking tear up. That's just a wonderful ending.
Well,
if they stick with it, and I hope they do. I really hope they do.
And it really seems that they have set up the proper pieces in place to have that happen. Because, like, if you think about it, the whole series began where Superman was on his own, where he basically was going around the world at supersonic speed, saving everybody. And it was only him. Now, throughout this series, he's built up his family. He has his 2 sons now that have powers. He has Steel, a partner he can trust. Lois has picked up the pace, but being almost like the leader.
But he has people that he can rely on and have trust and faith in to pick up the cape post him. But I guess I wonder, how do you end it with him having almost pure mortality, so that the audience knows that he will have that sunset moment? Or because the boys clearly they have their superpowers, they're good. Do you have like Lois and Clark die in a horrible car accident?
Jeez, that got dark suddenly.
I was with you until that.
just so that you can actually see on screen that they die in a warm embrace in those final moments.
Jesus Christ, that would work if this was like an Oscar contender. Something like that would work.
Or Zack Snyder.
Yes.
Maybe Lex puts on the suit and that's how Superman dies. Like he.
I hope that doesn't happen, Steve. But I do. To answer your question, because there is a very real question there.
There is.
Because I had a similar question earlier today. Is this what they're going to do? Meaning, so you give Clark and Lois that ending. Two people in love can live their life together. They live out their life together. And it's okay for Superman to accept that because he has the super sons who will pick up the cape and pick up where he left off. I have a feeling it won't be as simple as that, but I do have a feeling that's the direction that they are going in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think so.
Does any of us have a problem with that, or do you think does that work for each of you?
I don't have a problem. I wouldn't even have a problem, honestly, if towards the end of the final episode, there's an extreme flash forward to Lois and Clark in their 80s.
Yeah,
just
sitting
on the porch out in front of the farm, and the boys are now grown up, and maybe they have kids, they're seeing the grandkids.
Okay, that's good. I like that.
We see basically the heroes that have spawned from them.
Generations.
The Superman legacy. That's how it ends.
Yeah,
the Superman legacy. That is gold.
That's why it was like funny because this is a super fan moment from me because after I saw this episode, I was like thinking, if I wanted to go really cheesy as a comic book fan, how would I want this to end? I would want to see Superman age, like what you said, Steve, flash forward a couple of years and he's sitting with Lois. Maybe you get a cameo from Bruce Wayne finally, and you have Superman Clark basically reminiscing with his friends and family saying, I had a good life. Yeah. As his sons are in the background,
with their kids. Maybe there's a crypto running around.
Yeah. You have the ultimate legacy moment of Superman where you actually acknowledge everything that has made Superman
something that he was scared of his whole life, which was being able to be with someone and have a family as an alien, and what the implications were. And then he has a family, and then the trials and tribulations of having that family. But if he can ride off into the sunset, but have this legacy that's left behind and be comfortable and okay, and have that moment of like reprieve
where he goes, okay, yeah, I did. I can sit back and I trust my family around me to save the day.
I think that would be just a great way to end the show. Normally, I'm not a big fan of that idea, Steve, of like doing a massive flash forward and showing where everyone is now 15 years in the future. But that idea is pretty much built into the show. I mean, we started in contemporary times, and the show has always gone back to give us the origin story that they skipped. So why not do the opposite? It actually is built into the format of the show. Mm-hmm. And in that respect, a scene like that, Steve, would work perfectly.
It bookends it.
Yes, it would work perfectly. And now, Steve, I want that. I think it has to be done.
I want to be hired, to be on a writing staff with you guys so we can actually keep making good stuff.
I know. All right. So the central conflict, obviously, Superman versus Lex Luthor, which all of us were waiting for that moment.
Oh, dude, this was awesome.
Because so far up to this point, it's been more or less Lois versus Lex. So there were I personally, I'm not going to speak for the rest of you, but me, I was pining for this. I really wanted to see Superman stand up to Lex. I want to see Lex stand up to Superman. I want that iconic moment. And they gave it to us. I didn't expect it to go the direction it did, but it shows just how well they're writing Lex Luthor, because I was torn. David can attest to this. I wasn't sure. I had to call him today. I wasn't sure how I felt about how how letting Superman become a rage machine. I didn't like it. And I know in the comic books,
I loved it.
Well, I'll get to you in a second, because David managed to not talk me off the cliff, because I wasn't upset about it.
Yeah.
I just was conflicted. And my problem was I didn't know if I wanted to see Superman act like that. I didn't want to see Superman lose who he is or was. But when Lex Luthor said, laughed, that was his whole plan, to manipulate Clark into revealing his true self to his family and to others. I get that. That's an awesome strategy. It works. But what does it say about Superman? I don't think I like what it said about Superman until David made it better for me and said, well, think about this. He's not quite Superman right now. He acted that way because he's kind of like, he's human.
Well, especially since they established the fact that when he was given General Lane's heart, even the Kryptonian computer said, we do not know what this transplant's going to do to you.
Yeah. Well, and we're seeing the effects. He's dyeing his hair. He's having heart palpitations.
He's becoming more human.
And why I enjoyed it was, one, it was just a good old fashioned one of the best street fights I think I've seen in a while since Daredevil. Like, it was raw. It was brutal. It felt good.
They both did real good.
They both did real good with the choreography. It felt legitimate. It felt like I was watching two guys drunk beating the shit out of each other. But the fact that, Jonathan wanted to jump in and Lois even held him back to be like, he's got to get this out. And then that moment where you're like, is he going to choke him out? To me, it was less about what is the heart doing in terms of his physical traits and then what are the red lights doing? It was more like, strip all that away. Again, this is an alien guy who's always tried to be above and beyond and set an image and be a guiding light for humanity. But now he's more human than he's ever been able to be in his entire life.
Those explanations makes me okay with it.
Mm-hmm.
I maybe I was just in the moment while I was watching the episode. I didn't have a chance to really consider what you guys are now sharing. But as soon as David said it, I'm like, okay, I'm okay with it. That makes perfect sense. I don't know why that just went over my head, but it makes perfect sense. We know that he's a man who's struggling to hold on to what he was. I don't want to call him human, but he's half human.
Yeah.
I guess you could say.
Or 5%.
Yeah.
A lot of, I think, problems that Superman fans might have with this series is like, we have never seen a more human version of Superman than what this show.
Superman 3 drunk in a bar is pretty human.
That's pretty human. But
let's relax a little.
But I'm also taking, like, when it comes to kind of like what we as Superman fans think of Superman. I mean, even when you look at Henry Cavill's performance as Superman, they try to do a gritty performance, but it never really hit because it didn't feel human like this did.
There just wasn't enough history.
There wasn't enough history. There wasn't enough narrative build up to explain, this is who he is.
Well, and he's always been positioned, regardless of the format, as he's the Boy Scout. He's the one who's always going to choose the right direction, or at least attempt to. And if he makes a mistake, he learns from it or tries to course correct. But he's always trying to do what's right. And in this moment, he's got so much pent up anger and resentment, and he's trying to protect his family.
Exactly.
Luthor's been going after his wife, his kids. He's at his wit's end.
What to do. And it's
especially imagine someone who had all this power, this ability to stop people from doing bad things, and he no longer has that ability. I mean, he's kind of going through like I don't want to say an existential crisis.
Midlife?
It's a midlife crisis.
Yeah.
It's a Superman midlife crisis is what it really is.
You know what he needs? He needs to go buy a Corvette.
Yeah. A Superman motorcycle.
Superman motorcycle.
Yeah.
Superman Harley.
But I mean, when he landed,
shows up next episode rolling up on Lana with a Harley.
With a hog, yeah. When he landed in that one episode in front of Lex's truck, that was a moment where it felt like he was really truly trying to extend the olive branch and be like, hey, let's just call it done, man. Like, we've gone at this for years now.
He was being Superman.
He was being Superman. Like, and then Lex just couldn't let it go. And so now you're seeing the opposite reaction from Clark.
That's the almost beautifully poetic thing about this is, like, we got to see Superman be Superman, like extend that olive branch, because you're right, Steve. We always expect him to be the Boy Scout, and basically he's the first one to give the olive branch to his enemy, right? But here now we get to see Clark. It's not Superman, it's Clark now.
And he gave him a fistful of knuckles.
He basically, all through his mind, he's thinking to himself, this guy's attacked my family. He's attacked the woman that I love.
And the woman I loved in high school.
Yeah. He's attacked everybody, and he's not going to stop. Lex has made this point perfectly clear to Clark.
Yeah.
I ain't going to stop.
No.
I'm going to keep on coming after you, and you're going to have to put me into the grave. And that reaction of his when he is choking the life of Luthor, and then Luthor's smiling, and that breaks him because that brings back Superman.
Yeah.
I feel sorry for people like that because I hate, let's look at this from a real life perspective for a second. If I was someone who worked so hard to live a moral, ethical life,
Oh, yeah.
and make all the right decisions, and 99.9% of my life, I've made those decisions. And then one asshole comes in and wants to nag me and troll me. And in front of everybody, I just lose my shit because he's pushing all of the worst buttons.
Yes.
Fucking with your family, threatening your friends. And then for a split second, you lose that composure that you've worked forever to maintain. And it's lost because of one asshole. Like that's so fucking frustrating. And I hope that will play a part in the upcoming episode. I would like Superman to sit with that a bit. The shame, the guilt he might feel for showing that type of side in front of his family. Now, we might have moved past it already because there was that moment where the boys do what boys do. It's like, oh shit, our father just knocked out Lex Luthor, without superpower. I mean, so I guess we kind of already got the reaction of outsiders, and it didn't seem like it was going to do anything to Clark. However, I would like for him to wrestle with that a bit.
Oh, I think he is going to in the next episode, because like now it's time for our hero and our villain to lick their wounds, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Because now it's going to be, what is Lex going to do? Because Clark just beat the shit out of him. And I'm sure Lex was like thinking, well, he's going to be depowered. I can beat the shit out of him. And like that kind of fell through. And at this point, Lex Luthor has been thwarted by Superman and Lois multiple times now. They took away his monster. They took away Doomsday. And now Clark basically beat him physically in a street fight. So
you think Doomsday is going to come back after Lex shows up with his suit and actually steps in to save Superman?
We said that during our last discussion. I forgot you weren't here. Yeah. So what I said during our last discussion, I said, because there were people complaining on social media. I think that's what started the conversation, right, Dave?
Yeah.
They were saying, so that's how you defeat Doomsday. That's awful. That's stupid.
That's not Doomsday. Doomsday.
Right. This isn't the Doomsday.
It's alternate Clark.
This is Superman, just from another dimension, a good-hearted Superman from another reality who was manipulated to become this beast in order to do away with the pain he felt of losing his family and being this person.
Which the poetry there that rhymes with what you just said, with what David just said about our current Clark. Lex has pushed buttons on two different Supermen in two different dimensions and turned one into a beast and pushed this other one into a deformed image of himself.
Yeah.
Lex is a dickhead.
Lex is the ultimate troll.
So that's what I'm saying. Like, I feel like what's going to happen is because he took off and he had that moment with Lois where he realized, I think she reminded him of who he is
100%,
inside.
100%.
And he took off. What's going to happen is he's probably going to be gone for the rest of the season until the end. When it looks like all is lost and Brainiac is killing everyone. The Super Sons are fighting. Jeremy Irons is fighting. Is it Jeremy Irons?
No, I was like, Jeremy Irons.
Is he an actor?
Yeah,
yes, that's an actor.
He played.
John Irons. John Irons is fighting.
Now I'm gonna have Jeremy Irons.
He was Ben Affleck's Alfred.
Yeah,
my God.
That's right. So
and Hans Gruber's brother.
So we're gonna have like John Irons and Nat fighting.
Yeah,
all's gonna feel like it's lost. And then Doomsday is going to have his redemption moment. Bizarro Superman's going to have his redemption moment, and he's going to end up saving the day.
And dying.
And then dying. Yeah.
And dying. That's the Superman
death
I
of
think
Doomsday.
I think that's the death of Superman. That where we
The real death of Superman?
death of Superman is
Oh,
because
it's so
Doomsday
fucking
will
dark.
come in because that's actually still Clark
It is, yeah.
in there. So he'll die,
Yeah.
and then Clark will become human. He'll retire, and then his sons will take over. And then that's how we end it.
What a well-written show.
I'm just sitting here
what?
thinking, like, this is beautifully.
That's why-
Like,
That's why I said, Steve. I mean, at that point, now I'm just thinking, what fan wants do I want? I want to see Bruce Wayne. That'd be freaking cool. The world's finest.
it would
Now,
be, but I don't need it.
I don't need
given
it.
what
In
you
the
just
words of Dick Grayson from Titans, fuck Batman.
said. Fuck that, man.
This is a Superman show. We don't need that.
But God, how poetic of what they've strung together here.
Yeah. There is so much going on with this show from episode to episode that we don't even have time to get into, because we're talking about the superficialities. We're talking about the overt plot in a lot of ways, but there are so many things within the narrative that we don't really have time to get into that is definitely there. There's a lot of value there that we can definitely break down, like what you just brought up, Steve, about the poetry of what Lois is doing, or Lex, what Lex is doing, you know, with Bizarro and Bizarro Doomsday and our Clark. So there's just so much there.
There's
The question-
layers, like an onion.
The real question now, and like, especially since we asked it last episode, was what do you do with Lex? I mean, like,
Well, he's got to die.
unfortunately, yeah. That's why I told him in the last episode, Steve, was like, I guess you have to have Lex die.
Well, any
because-
sympathy that we had, Dave, for Lex, it went away at the end of last episode.
Mhm.
That in a lot of ways, I feel like that was the point. That was what the
yeah.
writers were trying to do. Like, hey, let's give you this guy who we feel a little conflicted. He has a legitimate beef with Lois. I mean, he was locked away for 17 years, lost his family. So we can have some sympathy. We can understand where he's coming
But
from.
he had multiple off ramps.
Correct.
Exactly.
He chose.
He chose the bad.
Yeah.
He chose the bad. His daughter gave him a way out. Lois gave him a way out. Clark gave him a way out. His assistant gave him a way out.
He probably gave more than a way out.
Yeah. We'll talk about that in a second. And he chose
He's just so.
he chose revenge,
Yeah.
hate, anger over what he wanted. And that says a lot. It makes you realize that Lex didn't really care. He didn't care about his daughter. I'm not saying he might love her, but he cares. He's
selfish.
selfish.
He's
he cares
selfish.
more about himself and
He's
what he wants.
narcissistic.
Yeah. So that was the end of our sympathy. That last episode was the nail in the coffin for sympathy. Now we are viewing, and that's what this episode did in large part. We are now to view Lex as the villain he always and usually is. And we know because Amanda McCoy, I believe is the character's name,
Yes.
offered Lex the suit. And we'll get into that in just a moment, because first I want to talk about the bar scene that leads into Amanda McCoy's anger towards Lex. So he offers Smallville $10 million.
Yes.
Okay.
To
for every
everybody.
person. Do you think anyone has the integrity living in that podunk town with no perceivable future?
God, it was lucky that Kyle was not there.
Oh, dude, Kyle would be like, right here.
Right.
Guys, 10 million? Are you serious? Come on.
I have a kid coming in.
Yeah.
And plus, I have alimony and
I got alimony.
child support.
I gotta pay.
I need a new truck.
You're right. Kyle would have said.
Kyle would have said yes.
I understand what they were doing. I just felt like it was a little, that was the comic book isms I'm not a fan of. It felt a little too wholesome and
But that is Smallville, though.
It's a tight knit community, and they keep
Yeah.
each other's backs.
if this was
you know?
like in Metropolis,
$10 million, I ain't keeping anyone's
yeah.
back.
If this was Metropolis, sure. Yeah, I understand it. If it was done in Metropolis, but the problem is the iconography of Smallville.
yeah.
It's a close knit group.
It's a close knit community.
And they even alluded to that in previous episodes multiple times with
Yeah.
Clark's, mother, and
They're
the
very
things that she
united.
did.
They're
Yeah.
very united.
I am not disagreeing with the logic. I'm saying I just don't like it. It felt cheesy, but I understand why they were doing it. I get it. It also ultimately pushed Lex out of the way and it empowered the family or the town. And I think it's about the town being behind not Clark necessarily, but behind Superman, because it seems like everyone in that town now knows who he is.
Oh, they have to.
It's getting out like wildfire, man. By the end of it, the whole town's going to know.
What's the end game with that, though? Like, what's the end game? Like, is that something we want? Do we want everyone to know who Superman is?
Well, I think that's but that's part of the story, though, Mike, is like.
Do you think that's part of the reason why he's going to bow out?
Yeah, because like if you think about it,
you can't live a normal existence and not the duality.
Yeah, around in season 2, the whole story was of how Clark had to come to terms with actually sharing with people that he's Clark and Superman. That was the whole point with the Lana Lang story, where he finally tells Lana, you know, I'm Superman. I'm Clark, but I'm also Superman.
Hold on to your tits. And I am Superman.
And like the beautiful thing, the beautiful thing about that is now we get to see not just his close-knit family accept Clark for who he is, but also now the whole community.
The whole community that's known him his whole life.
Yeah, the whole community that basically saw him grow up, saw his mom. And I like the fact that basically everything is now tying together, you know, the town's closeness to the Kent family.
Okay, David. So because I agree with that's a good observation. So because the family has always, or the city has always rallied, this town has always rallied behind the Kents, and they made it a point to remind us that his mother was the pillar of this town. And of course they listened to you. Of course they would respect you. You're the son of Martha Kent. And they've been built. They kind of went away from that idea for about 2.5 seasons, but it's definitely how they started the show. Mm-hmm. So perhaps the whole town knowing his secret, or a large part of the town knowing his secret, is part of this communal, not integrity, what's the word I'm looking for? This communal support they have for Clark.
Acceptance.
So even if they find out who he is, perhaps Smallville will be his safe haven. They won't divulge his secret. If they were willing to give up $10 million, maybe that's the point of the scene. Mm-hmm. If they're willing to give up $10 million, then of course they would be willing to hold on to his secret.
They will never give it up.
They'll never give it up.
So maybe that's the point.
Because also to them, who cares? It's still Clark.
Yeah.
It's still Clark. And even that one girl that found out, you know, a couple episodes ago, and for a minute there, I was like, wait, is that Natalie?
That's racist.
Well, because she had her hair up like Natalie did in one episode, and
joking,
I was like,
dude. I was joking. You don't need to justify.
Well, I'm just saying.
I thought it was Nat too for a while.
But then, you know, that you find out that she knows, or she's, you know, deciphered based on observation.
Yeah,
and a couple other people have. But they're not telling anybody. They're just talking to the Jonathan and what's his fuck?
And that's endearing.
Jordan.
That's endearing. I do like that. When we break it down like we're doing, I do like that. It feels in sync with everything we know so far about the show, about the people in the town. So ultimately it does work. And if that's what they're doing, they're trying to say, hey, you know what? Not everyone's going to know who Clark really is, but the town that he chose to live in again as an adult, to bring his family to protect, maybe the town is going to look at Superman or Clark even differently now. Like, we always love this guy, but now this guy is Superman too.
Yeah. And like, that's the whole thing that I really like too, is like, if they hint at the fact that it's never been about him keeping his secret. It's always now it's about, you know, like everyone accepting the fact it's Clark and Superman. It's kind of like the good people of Smallville, and maybe the good people by the end, the good people of the world kind of look at it and go, okay, he's Clark Kent, but he's Superman. Mm-hmm. Who the hell cares? And like, for villains, they're like going to go, well, they're going to be so focused on the fact that it's Superman, they're never going to actually care what his secret identity is because it's Superman.
Excuse me. Okay, so we saw Lana Lane get tossed around. Man, that's
not the way you wanted to have tossed around.
No. That was hard to watch. It's always hard. Anytime that like there's physical abuse on a woman in a TV show, it always kind of just makes me
Hard.
Like,
I'm sorry, folks. If you could have seen it on the on my viewpoint, I just see Mike shaking his fist really hard, and then Steve says hard. And I'm like going, yes, this is making you hard.
It was too easy. I had to. Sorry.
Man, that was awesome.
it's funny because
it's true.
Because I was going to say a similar joke. I was going to say, I don't mind tossing a woman around if it's in bed, getting real physical if she's into it. But like, my point is like, it's never fun to see those types of things, especially my main point is that it was super visceral.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I am so glad that this show, you mentioned it earlier, Steve, about the choreography, the blocking between both the actors that play Lex and Superman, and how good it looked. Same thing with Otis attacking Lana.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was visceral. I believed it. The way he slammed her on the ground, threw her over the counter, the way she kicked him into the aquarium. There was not a lot of cuts, so they were really doing those stunts. Not the actors. I don't know if they were doing the stunts, but the actors or stunt individuals were not relying on the camera doing the work for them, meaning cuts, angles. Obviously, you have to choose the right angles to hide the hits and the attacks. But my point is, they didn't overuse cuts to hide the action and the stunts. They allowed the camera to sit for numerous seconds so that we can take in the violence. And it really did work. I thought for a split second Lana was going to be killed.
I did too.
Yeah.
And I actually enjoyed the fact that afterwards, like the traumatic, like you could just see the trauma in her face later, and even in Sarah's face. Like it affected them deeply, as it should have.
Well, this is like, this goes back to like making good superhero action sequences is kind of like one of the series that you alluded to, Steve, Daredevil. You have to make your fights visceral and believable. And like, honestly, Superman and Lois has done that with all their fights so far, even down to the Doomsday one, where it's kind of like you feel the impact of each punch. Superhero fighting, yay. But in this particular episode, that fight between Lex and Clark was just the best Superman fight I can think of, because throughout the entire time we are invested in it. We believe that there's a modicum of like belief that Clark can lose this fight. It's so realistic. You're like, feel just like what you said, Mike, you feel uncomfortable what happens to Lana, because shoot. But we really do feel some realism and some visceralness to it.
Yeah.
And that's what's missing in a lot of superhero, IPs, where it's like, it's too unbelievable with their fights. And then they come back and say, well, why does this work? Well, it's because we get invested in the superhero.
They either rely on too much superpowers, or too, like Man of Steel. I feel like I liked Man of Steel for the most part, but it got out of control
Toward the end. Yeah.
The last 20 minutes was like, what the fuck am I watching? I feel like I'm watching the ending of like Star Wars with all of the shooting and the action. I'm like, I don't feel like this is Superman. We're losing the intimacy of a man fighting against all these people, because it just looks like a bunch of, violence and messiness. Yeah. Whereas this, look at the strategy too. So that these writers were handed a smaller budget. So instead of throwing their hands up and say, fuck it, we can't do what we want to do, or let's force it and then have really shitty effects, they wrote a story that justifies less superhero action.
Yes. But like, they make their superhero action count.
Yes, these people are smart with what they're doing, not just with the ideas of how they are, I should say, not just with the ideas they implement when it comes to the Superman story, but the entire production. Look at everything we've seen in terms of action this season. Certainly, we've had a few of those must-have Superman moments, but the boys themselves are being shown on iPhones, on TVs, on different devices. They're not being shown directly flying around and doing all these superhero antics, because the budget would balloon.
Yeah.
So they find creative ways to keep the show contained.
Well, it goes back to like what I think you weren't here when we were discussing about this, Steve, but the fight between him and Doomsday, that was probably the best fight scene I've ever seen for those two characters.
They blew a lot of their budget there.
But they made it count because, like, if you think about it, the fight scene wasn't that much. It's just Doomsday and Clark fighting in space.
It was like I think it was like 4 or 5 total screen minutes.
Yes, but in those moments, they made it count by tying it into their narrative and basically trying to force the notion that we're seeing this fight through Clark's eyes,
while he's also seeing flashbacks
of his family and flashbacks of Lois, and suddenly you're being viscerally dragged into this and saying, oh my God, this is what Superman feels like on the day he dies.
And correct me if I'm wrong, the entire first episode was their fight. And look how they made it feel like it was so much bigger than it actually was by intercutting it throughout the entire episode with stuff dealing with Lois, flashback sequences. So the writers just continue to find ways to cut corners the right way so that they can tell a high quality story.
Maybe they're not writers. Maybe they're accountants.
Listen, man, I don't know what it is, but I will say this. I will follow this writing team to their next show.
Yeah, hopefully they stay together as a team and they don't just, go off their separate ways and do something else.
The one thing I want to ask you guys now, though, is, okay, they've had their first Lex and Superman fight now between Lex and Clark. And it's this, I don't know how you top this with Lex getting the war suit and then it's Lex in a war suit versus Superman.
You have to think that Lex, if he's got a suit, and he's got some more tricks up his sleeve that we just can't fathom right now. And with Clark aging and having to succumb to the human side of his heart transplant, you just have to assume that when it gets down to it, whatever tricks he has up his sleeve against Clark, it's going to have Clark on death's door again.
You think that it's going to be like a replay of Doomsday?
And I think it's going to be a replay of Doomsday, but it's going to be with Lex, and then Doomsday is going to have to come in and save the day, and ultimately the both of them die in that battle.
Yeah,
that's what I think will happen.
Yeah,
I think that would be pretty.
I
cool.
co-sign that. I do have a quick question before we get into the suit. Amanda McCoy,
Audie,
is she? Yeah, is she in the comic books at all, or is she made up for? Because I don't remember this name.
It's hard to actually say because like Lex has always had that secretary.
Yeah, Mrs. Stepmocker.
Stepmocker, yeah. But even like back in Miss Stepmocker, even in the comics,
he's always had a woman sidekick.
A woman sidekick that basically is kind of his go-to.
Yeah.
Like my favorite one, it was the character that was in The Adventures of Superman.
Adventures of Superman. Which one's that one?
That's the animated one.
Oh, the new one.
Lex,
no, the 90s one.
Was it it was the 90s one.
You're talking
you're not talking about
Bruce Timm version?
Yeah, the Bruce Timm, where his secretary was like this hitman. And she was like this absolute killer.
So she was a hit woman.
Yeah. And like that's always been kind of like Lex's MO. He has a secretary that a helper, a woman helper. It doesn't have.
Yeah, I have noticed that. That's something I've definitely noticed, that he's always a woman.
So she is a character that's been around. I had to go up and deep into the DC database.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Give us some details.
Mainstream universe from 1986 to 2011. Her full name is Amanda Marie McCoy. She's neutrally aligned, but clearly not in this version. And she was created by John Byrne, so been around for a minute. First appearance was Superman Volume 2, number 2 in February of 1987.
What's her connection to Lex Luthor? Is there?
Yeah, I mean, she works for Lex.
Yeah, she works for
Is that
Lex
what you said? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So
but she's always been kind of like this brainy type of.
She discovered that a woman named Lana Lang had been seen in several background photographs at known Superman appearances. So,
Okay, I don't remember her in the comic books. Do you actually remember her, Dave, in the comic books?
Yeah, because like she's one of the.
I mean, actually remember her, like not like in passing. Like, do you remember her storylines or anything? Because I don't.
I don't remember her storylines, but I remember her in passing because like she was also used. I believe, sparingly in like Alan Moore's run where he did the Man of Tomorrow.
Okay.
Because she was like the go-to secretary figure that Lex would call.
Okay. Yeah, for some reason, I don't remember her.
Because there's so many of them, dude. Lex has gone through so.
I feel like I should lose my Superman card, but I just don't remember.
The problem with Lex and his, I guess you could say his minions, they all kind of group together. You get fans of like certain characters like Otis, or you get even like Gus.
Yeah.
You get like characters like that become connected to Lex as minions, but he has so many that basically a lot of them kind of blend together.
Yeah, so her main background at the end of the day is she's the one that figured out that Clark was Superman, but
Yes.
Lex didn't believe it, and so he fired her, and to prove it, she stole Lex's kryptonite ring and lured Superman to a graveyard to prove her theory.
Her theory.
And her secret power is science.
Yeah, she's a brainy.
She's a brainy.
She's a brainy. She's a brainy character.
What if she's Brainiac?
Oh, that might be cool.
They still have to actually figure out who Milton is. They haven't, because remember they keep alluding to that character.
They keep mentioning him. Yeah,
and I'm like going, okay, he's gonna make an appearance soon.
I was not able to look this up. So if there are listeners out there, or if you gentlemen know here in the studio the answer, then please, provide me with the answer. I wasn't quite sure what Lex had picked up, the piece of paper that he handed to Amanda and told her to give this to Milton, that he will know what to do with that. Now, was that the specs for the lights, for his suit, or for something that we don't even know yet? Did you happen to see what that was?
No, it's something that basically was kept secret. So I know that's going to come into play later.
I didn't think it was for the lights, and I didn't think it was for the suit for two reasons. Because Amanda, asked what it was. And Lex said, Milton will know what to do with it.
Yes.
And Amanda knew about the red lights, and she's the one who offered the suit to Lex. So there's a third thing. Unless what she was talking about is the suit, and she now knows about it because she chose him and she spoke to Milton. So, but I think that's too convoluted.
No, that's too
I think there's a third thing.
Yeah, I think there's a third thing. The MacGuffin, or the red herring, is the fact that everyone's going to think, oh, it's the red lights in the war suit that he gives off to her to get the suit.
Now, originally, David, you had a great theory that I want to get into that you had shared with me earlier today. So I had said, well, possibly that third thing might end up being what ends up becoming Brainiac. And then you floated this idea that I liked better, that it's actually Lex's super suit that somehow gets entangled with whatever Milton's doing, combined with the artificial intelligence that we only saw for half a second that represented Superman.
Yep.
And then boom, that is what ultimately constructs Brainiac. Dude, you are Superman genius, because I think that is legitimate. I do think that might actually end up being the case.
I think that would be the most awesome thing. How do you bring, because the question becomes,
well, let's fill Steven really fast. The reason why we even came up with that idea, or David, I don't want to take your idea, Dave, I say we, the reason why Dave came up with that idea is because I had shared some thoughts from a few listeners that had only one complaint so far about Superman and Lois, and it was the AI hologram of Clark. They said there's literally no point. You had him show up for 5 minutes or less, and then in that exact same episode, he is revived. The real Superman comes back to life. So what was the point of AI Superman? Why remind us of how the artificial intelligence works in the Forces of Solitude?
Yes.
Because they're going to thieve it and bastardize it into
Brainiac.
You know, I'm gonna make this fun. If you're right, I will give you 150. Oh, come on. Oh,
I'm sorry. It might be that way, but I'm not. No, not from my.
Should I be offended? I feel a little offended. $150.
Damn.
I'm gonna be praying then.
But you have to tick all the boxes.
So the boxes have to be
artificial intelligence, Superman, Lex suit,
Milton paper.
Yes, the Milton whatever he's doing paper thing. If it's all three, you'll get a crisp $150
in Rain Man bucks. It's gonna be like Lex bucks, like Otisburg.
Yeah, it's
the idea.
Otis Bucks. Here
Otis
you go,
bucks. It's gonna
buddy.
be Otis bucks.
Otis bucks.
The worst bucks ever.
I'm gonna make those.
Why not Otis Bucks crypto? Fuck
There you go,
it.
Mike. There you go, Mike. For all of our followers on Patreon, here's some Rain Man bucks.
Yeah. It's our NFT.
Otisburg. Wait a minute. If we get a Rain Man bucks, can we get a Davidsburg?
Oh my god.
Come on, Davidsburg.
No.
Sounds like a
No.
normal place.
I'm sure it exists actually somewhere.
You know what? I think David, not to say you're a sidekick character, David, but you know what? If I was Lex, David would be my Otis. Let's be honest about this.
I'd be gladly Otis. Otis is awesome, dude. Otis is fantastic.
Because he knows it's true.
Otis is cool. The only thing you can make me happier is if you told me I'm going to be partly Gus too. Oh yeah, Gus. I love
my
that character.
God.
That character is like Richard Pryor is like my god.
Yeah. Yeah.
Corbin.
I will dress up as a general and go, Mike, we're here to save the day.
Mike just came back from the Pentagon.
I just came back from the Pentagon.
All right. So did we miss anything? Oh, Sarah. It looks like her story is going to come to an end probably really soon, which I do feel is smart because we have 4 episodes left and we need to start focusing on just the particulars. That's going to bring this show to an end. So I have a feeling we'll see Sarah again, I'm sure. Again, I'm not saying she's done completely. She'll probably be in and out, but the bulk of her story, I think, ended in this episode here with that decision going abroad.
And the fact that the boys both convinced her, particularly Jordan, like that whole moment of like, well, what's stopping you? Like, there's nothing stopping you except for your own mindset about being stuck in Smallville. And then to end it
I
with
love
both
that Jordan is the one that came up with that. It
Yes.
shows how much he's matured. The fact that he says, well, you don't need superpower to do any of that.
And you realize this is the moment that honestly I've been waiting for that character for Jordan, because the one thing we've always criticized about Jordan right now, not like criticized in a bad way, but for his character, his story arc is about him becoming mature. Because his brother is more mature than he is. He listens to his brother like a little brother should or would. And like the whole story for this season is like Jordan having to become mature enough to kind of be equal to Jonathan.
and just coming into his own. But, you know, it'll be interesting because now he can maybe finally get that job at the diner that he's always wanted. Because Sarah's leaving the position open.
He's like, he's the son that everyone hopes they never have. like so much potential, could probably run America or some big major business, but instead he decides to work at an effing diner.
No, Dad, I want to play video games.
Hey, I want to play video games. I mean, but I just like that at that one moment after she's kind of like come to terms with, I could do, and then they just take her
about with the 2 sons.
Yeah, and then they just take her to the Greek islands. Like, amazing.
That was a great moment. That was really good, and I love. This happened a little bit, I'd say mostly last year. I like that they ended up bringing the 3 of them together rather than just pairing Jordan and Sarah together, letting them be like a trio of friends. You cover more ground that way, and it just feels more heart-touching that you have these 3 people that are really close to each other. They're not necessarily in relationships, but it doesn't matter. They still love each other.
Yeah,
and
it's like
care
a
about each
sister.
other.
It's like the sister element.
It's more believable and it's more relatable to everybody, because like the way they've done their relationship isn't like a romantic relationship. That's more like Lois and Clark. Here, it's an actual real friendship. It's a friendship between the 3 of them, where I was really worried around season 2 and season 3. Are they going to do this whole thing where Sarah falls in love with Jordan finally by the end?
I
they
thought
end up
so
together.
too, but I like that they didn't, and
think
she
about
was
it, Steve.
very upfront about it.
That would be a very CW thing. You would see that in Arrow. You would see that in Flash.
fortunately, this is one thing I do agree with progressives, and there is an idea that women should have their own story and not always have to be aligned with a character. Yeah. And I think characters can be characters. They don't always have to be in relationships. If there's a boy and a girl in a scene, it doesn't mean they need to like each other. They can just be friends. And in a lot of ways, when you do that with characters, it constrains them anyways. Mm-hmm. Allow them to be free. Oftentimes will open up a lot more possibilities. And it actually did. That's what made room for the trio of friends. Mm-hmm. And, well, you could throw in Nat because she's part of that group too. So, all right. Well, that does bring us to the end of our discussion. I'm going to give this episode a 94%. It was originally a 91. But after I spoke to you earlier today, Dave, about the whole Lex thing, and you helped me kind of work through it and make more sense. It's just a good episode. It's well written, great camera blocking. The fight scenes, grounded as they were still very well done. It goes to show you don't need all of the lights and, the spectacle in order to have a good superhero show. Yeah. And this show continues to prove that. Dave.
I'm right away. I mean, I'm sure people can probably guess. I really liked this episode just for the Lex and Superman face-off that we finally got. For that fight scene, this was something that I did not think I would see, because arguably, to me, this is one of the best Superman fights, because it was so believable, so relatable, that I found myself cheering for Clark.
Yeah.
To say, kick his ass.
Well, it was a great way to make them be able to have a believable fight.
A believable fight.
Two humans essentially fighting.
And while it may sound ridiculous about Lex creating red light, green light in the middle of Smallville, it makes sense for the character. Yeah. The character is that much of a genius and I guess you could say a schemer.
You have
to pull this off.
He has strategy and plans inside plans. Yeah.
So I actually walked away with this thinking this is a really solid episode and one of the better episodes of the season, that I gave it a 95.
That's where I'm at. 95, even before you guys said your number. That's where I was coming in. It's really, really, really good.
Aren't you getting sad now that it's coming to an end?
Not actually.
I am. I'm getting sad simply because
it's just so good.
It's so good, and you can think of all the different possibilities that they could have done with just a couple of more extra seasons with other characters. But then again, maybe it's okay. And then on the other side, I feel a little sad for everyone involved in the show, because they're not going to hit that magic number for syndication.
Yeah. But I mean, like, overall, that was a question that you brought up in the last episode, Mike, is this feels kind of sad seeing the final season. And it was like weird, because I actually thought about that right after the episode. I'm like going, is this gearing up to be a sad kind of like, I'm going to miss this show? Not really, because this show is so good.
It might be one of those,
rewatchability of it.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. It might be one of those things you give it, 2, 3, 5 years down the road. I highly doubt I will ever go back and revisit Flash, maybe season 1 of Arrow, but I haven't done it yet.
Yeah.
I can see myself going back and doing this one if I can build the emotional wall up to be able to sit and go
Steve,
through it.
I don't know if you're similar to me, Steve. I started a rewatch of the first season. I had sat down and I made the mistake of smoking a little weed, and Jesus, I didn't even get through the first episode and I'm tearing up. Jeez, I can't do this.
Well, especially because of where you're at.
I just don't want to get into those types of feelings right now.
Yeah, and especially what's coming because you sat through it, and then you're living through this moment right now, watching it in real time. It tugs at some strings.
Well, especially that first episode you're talking about, because I've been rewatching the series, I think right now through season 2, but season 1, that first episode still got me. With the death of his mom.
Yeah, it's such a good episode.
That whole episode still got me, and I was like going, that's a testament of how good this writing staff
I just rewatched Man of Steel and Batman v Superman the other day, and even Man of Steel, I'm with Mike. Like, I still enjoy the shit out of that. There are scenes in that I tear up in because of the emotional depth of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there are some great things when it comes to Man of Steel and Batman vs Superman.
Oh yeah.
All right. That brings us to the end. Thank you, everyone.
Who are you bitches?
Mother of God! Would you look at the time? When you came here, you had an hour.